Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In today's video, we're going to be discussing Albus Dumbledore, Azkaban, and the false imprisonment of Sirius Black. Before we get started, I just want to ask that if you do enjoy the videos, to please like the video and subscribe if you want, as it helps with the algorithm. Let's dive into it. Sirius hailed from the powerful wizarding family, the Blacks, and while many of his family members were advocates of blood purity, Sirius did not share this same belief. Many members of the Black family would follow very dark paths, and Sirius was an exception to this. Sirius Black started at Hogwarts in the year 1971, the same year that Peter Pettigrew, Remus Lupin, and James Potter began attending the school. The quartet of boys would eventually form a group called the Marauders, and one thing that they all had in common was that they were all Gryffindors. Before long, the boys were graduating from Hogwarts and went on to join the Order of the Phoenix, a secret society founded by Albus Dumbledore that opposed Lord Voldemort. The entire purpose of the Order was to oppose Voldemort and the Death Eaters, and they were a vital defense against their opposition during the First Wizarding War. However, it turned out that not all members of the Order were good, as Sirius's old friend, Peter Pettigrew, would go on to frame Sirius for a heinous crime. In 1981, Pettigrew murdered 12 muggles using a dark and powerful blasting curse, simultaneously destroying hundreds of feet of sewer system and leaving a 40-foot crater in the ground. Some way, somehow, Sirius Black was blamed and was promptly sent to Azkaban. After being banished to Azkaban, seemingly the whole world turned on Sirius, even the ghost portrait of the Fat Lady, and he was left there to rot for an astonishing 12 years. He was eventually able to escape the island fortress by turning into his animagus form, a black dog, and squeezing through the bars. There are a few things that I always found interesting about Sirius's imprisonment. First of all, why didn't he get a proper trial? All of the Death Eaters did. Bellatrix, the woman with the heavy-lidded eyes, looked up at Crouch and called, "The Dark Lord will rise again, Crouch. Throw us into Azkaban. We will wait. He will rise again and will come for us. He will reward us beyond any of his other supporters. We alone were faithful. We alone tried to find him." And then Karkaroff. "Crouch is going to let him out," Moody breathed quietly to Dumbledore. "He's done a deal with him. It took me 6 months to track him down, and Crouch is going to let him go if he's got enough new names. Let's hear his information, I say, and throw him straight back to the Dementors." And even Snape, who switched sides towards the end of the war and pledged allegiance to Dumbledore, was simply acquitted of his crimes on Dumbledore's word. "Snape has been cleared by this council," said Crouch disdainfully. "He has been vouched for by Albus Dumbledore." So, my question is this. If Dumbledore's word was enough to clear a former Death Eater of all charges, why couldn't he have freed Sirius? Sirius was a former member of the Order, his own organization. Why couldn't anything have been done to help him? Was Dumbledore convinced of Sirius's innocence, or was a veil pulled over his eyes, just like everyone else? If we look at the text further, we can derive some answers from Dumbledore himself. It is your turn to listen, and I beg you will not interrupt me, because there is very little time, he said quietly. There is not a shred of proof to support Black's story, except your word, and the word of 2 13-year-old wizards will not convince anybody. A street full of eyewitnesses swore they saw Sirius murder Pettigrew. I myself gave evidence to the Ministry that Sirius had been the Potter's secret keeper. "Professor Lupin can tell you," Harry said, unable to stop himself. "Professor Lupin is currently deep in the forest, unable to tell anyone anything. By the time he is human again, it will be too late. Sirius will be worse than dead. I might add that werewolves are so mistrusted by most of our kind that his support will count for very little, and the fact that he and Sirius are old friends. But listen to me, Harry. It is too late, you understand me? You must see that Professor Snape's version of events is far more convincing than yours. He hates Sirius," Hermione said desperately, "all because of some stupid trick Sirius played on him. Sirius has not acted like an innocent man. The attack on the Fat Lady, entering Gryffindor Tower with a knife. Without Pettigrew, alive or dead, we have no chance of overturning Sirius's sentence. But you believe us?" "Yes, I do," said Dumbledore quietly, "but I have no power to make other men see the truth, or to overrule the Minister of Magic. This tells us a few things. First of all, Dumbledore was still under the impression that Sirius Black had been secret keeper for the Potters, and if this is the case, it makes total sense that he would believe that Sirius was guilty up until this point. That would have meant that he would have been the one to reveal the Potter's location. Next, it looks like Severus Snape, who had recently changed allegiances, had told Dumbledore his own story about the events of the night, and I would imagine that he too was tricked by the stunt that Pettigrew pulled off, as at this point he was being completely honest and transparent. He hated Sirius, but I don't think he would have gone as far as to frame him for that sort of crime. Even when Harry says to Dumbledore, "But you believe us?" and he responds, "Yes, I do," there is what seems to be a lack of authenticity present. Every other part of their conversation still seems to suggest that Dumbledore believes he is guilty. It is not until he is given irrefutable evidence that he firmly believes Sirius's innocence. Pettigrew's framing of Sirius was really quite impressive. It was the perfect crime, and I think that is why he was even able to convince the likes of Snape and Dumbledore. Pettigrew knew right away that he would need to be the one to frame Sirius for the betrayal of Lily and James, as Sirius was the only other person that knew about him being secret keeper. Everyone else was still under the impression that it was Sirius. Pettigrew baited, or allowed himself to be found by Sirius, who was still furious after discovering what had happened to the Potters. Pettigrew was in a Muggle town, surrounded by Muggles, which ensured that he wouldn't have any proper witnesses nearby for the crime that he was about to commit. When Sirius arrived, Pettigrew feigned grief over the loss of the Potters, but his tune quickly changed, and he promptly produced a powerful blasting curse. Then, before I could curse him, he blew apart the street with the wand behind his back, killed everyone within 20 feet of himself, and sped down into the sewer with the other rats. Besides the Marauders, only Remus Lupin knew that Pettigrew was an animagus, and so he really would have been Sirius's last hope. However, Lupin, who was unsure of what to think anymore, felt that the evidence against Sirius was too strong, and didn't say a word. Pettigrew had cunningly chopped off his own finger before departing into the sewer, which he left behind as evidence of his death. Because he was dead to the world, his innocence was implicit, which ensured that all fingers pointed at Sirius. There he was, in a street full of dead Muggles, with his former friend's finger on the ground in front of him. Surely he was guilty. Because Fudge was the first to appear on scene, Sirius was never given a trial or any possibility of exonerating himself. In the books, he recalls the aftermath of that evening in great detail. A crater in the middle of the street, so deep it had cracked the sewer below, bodies everywhere, Muggles screaming, and Black standing there laughing, with what was left of Pettigrew in front of him, a heap of blood-stained robes, and a few fragments. And what's most interesting about what Fudge saw was that Sirius was laughing. From the outside, he truly came across as a crazed, murderous lunatic that took pleasure in the heinous crimes that he had committed, where in reality he was a man that couldn't help but laugh as the world he knew crumbled around him. One of his childhood friends was dead. The other had switched sides. He was surrounded by the bodies of Muggles, and now he would have to live knowing the recommendation that he made to the Potters to make Pettigrew secret keeper. Sirius's story is truly a tragic one, and Pettigrew's framing of him was exceedingly well done, convincing even Albus Dumbledore. And that's it for this video. If you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.